Alright, so first we're gonna go through a little demo of making fringe. So later on in the video we'll talk more about making tassels, knotting the ends of woven materials, or maybe like fraying the ends of them to get a fringe. And this technique is for if you don't have enough material to fray to get an edge. Like, let's say you want this long of a fringe, but your material ends here. So what we're gonna do is connect a fringe from other string. But first, before we do that, this is a scrunchie. Look how long it is. Yes, it's hard to tell because the camera's so zoomed in, but this was a scrunchie of my grandmother's, and it's the black silk. And so before I join any fringe to this, I want to first hem it. So I'm going to do a twice turn hem. It's already kind of pressed, like a 1/4 inch, because that's where it was sewn. That's the seam allowance that it was sewn. But we're going to fold this, press it with the iron at a 1/4 inch. We're not going to do the whole thing for time. We're just going to do a little part. So after we press this, we're going to fold it again. Press it again. And that becomes our twice turn. And that'll make sure that when you do join the fringe to the edge of the material, it's not going to just fray and fall apart, and the fringe will actually stay joined and connected. So move our camera over to here. So this is what we pressed, this little portion here. So I'm just going to do a quick where did that thread go? That red thread. Oh, I know. I was gonna bring it to school. Okay, so first thing we want to do is just stitch along here. And what you want to do is twice turn, press it all the way along the edge of where you want to hem and where you want to add the fringe. So, but first we're gonna do a little running stitch to just make our twice turn hem. Now you could do a running stitch, you could do a back stitch, you could do a whip stitch. Those are all good things that you could do here. And we're just gonna do from here to here, okay? So first I'm gonna anchor my thread into the material with a knot. So leaving a little tail right here, I'm going to hold that tail so it doesn't slip through, and I'm going to make a loop. And before I pull the thread all the way through, I'm going to loop my needle through that loop twice and then pull it tight. And that is one anchor. We're going to do that a second time. Make a second anchor, leave a loop, circle our needle through it twice, and then now our knot is connected and anchored into the material. So we're just going to do a running stitch all the way down. If you want a cleaner line, you'll press it like this. If it's fraying at the edge, you could trim the fray off before you iron and before you sew, because just to get the fray out of the way. Another thing I was thinking of is that if you want to create like a ridge along the hem, if you have some sort of like thicker string or rope, you could tunnel it inside of here and wrap the hem around that, so that when we latch hook these fringe around the hem, it can go around like a circle, and that can create kind of a texture if that's what you want, or you can just leave it flat. A lot of these threads are just from the old stitches that I took out of the scrunchie. But we're doing it, we're moving along. Running stitch, running stitch. I'm just thinking of outer change coming from inner change, and how does that emerge over generations of just clearing space for things to be able to even emerge. Clearing space, making space, making spaciousness. Alright, so we've gone from here to here, and now I'm going to anchor. We've reached the end, so we're going to do another anchor. The same thing we did before. Holding a loop, circling around it once, and then twice. And if I wasn't, see how I'm at an end here, so this side is going to have to be twice turned as well. So I can leave a little bit of a tail, but if it wasn't, I could tunnel the needle back through, tuck it in somewhere that so that the tail can be long, so I'm not cutting so close to the knot, but it's still going to be tucked away and hidden. And then once I tunnel it through, then I can clip it, so it's just going to be totally hidden. It's kind of a little secret. So, okay. Here we have this. I'm gonna iron it one more time. Oh, probably shouldn't have ironed it straight onto the wood, but we're all alive still, so probably not the best idea, but okay. Now choose what kind of thread you have. I want to do something. I was thinking of doing something that's similar weight, because this is a pretty like lightweight material, and so I was thinking, like, do I have any silky kinds of threads? I actually do in here. It's actually silk thread, I think. I think it's silk. This, like, this one. Let's use that. So we're gonna have this black and amber. So what I want to do first is, like, decide how long I want the fringe to be. How long do you want it to hang off? And then double that. Okay. Double that. And then use this as kind of a measure to cut all the rest of them. I actually feel like this embroidery thread is kind of thick, and if you look at it, some embroidery flosses will have like 6 strands in it. This one is a weird one. It's made in Germany. It has 4 strands, so I might consider separating it into 2 strand bits. Because, I mean, maybe if my material was thicker, but I just feel like the thread is a lot thicker than the material, and to get them to a similar place, I should separate them. So that's gonna take some time, but luckily we're not in a rush. But we'll just show you the first few to get it going, so that you know and you can start working on it. Okay? So let's start with this first one. I'm gonna leave that there. This first one, we're gonna separate it, so kind of untwist it, and you're just gonna hold on to the 2 and pull them apart. And they might get all twisty, but you can just kind of smooth your fingers down it, and it should untwist. Okay, so now's the part where we take the 2 ends and we're gonna thread it through a needle. Okay, so what it looks like is this threaded through the needle with the two ends like that, okay? And we're going to go to the edge about 1/8 of an inch up, so halfway in between the seam line, fold, and the edge. Pull it through. Okay, and then you can take the needle off, and then what we do is we can loop these threads. Like that. Can you see that? Okay. So we'll do that again. Taking both ends and threading it through the needle. I usually like get them wet in my mouth and then kind of flatten them with my fingers, and then here we can leave a space. I mean, you can make them as close as you want or as spaced out as you want, but if you want it to be like a really thick fringe, just do it right next to it. And don't pull it all the way through, because then it'll just come out and you'll just have to loop it all over again. But basically you have this loop and you pull the threads through like that. See? So on one side it looks like this. On one side it looks like this. Okay. And you can just keep going down. Keep going all the way down and you'll have the fringe. Alright? And when you're done, you can twist them, you can braid them together. You can do whatever you like. Or you can just leave them. Alright? So, more to come. Thank you. Welcome to our tassel video. So, we have many different examples that we'll put on the screen for you to see the many different types of tassels. And tassels and beyond, tassels and fringe. And so, as you can see, there's some tassels that are like made individually, and there's some more fringe-like things that are more of the woven, like the edge of a weave. It's like when a material's being woven, there's at least a plain, like a, yeah, when the material is woven, there's threads going one way and then there's threads going perpendicular. So the threads that are continuing for longer, you know, when you buy material on a roll, or if you have a scarf that's long on a certain material or on a certain edge, those threads are the warp threads, and the weft threads are what's weaving back and forth across them. And I remember that because I think of left and right. It moves left and right, but I think of left and right. So then it would be the warp threads that become the fringe on the ends, where you can see the like intricate knotted ends where they end in a knot or they end in like a twist or a braid. And so those are more for weaving, if you're gonna weave a project. But you could, if you have a material, you could remove, like kind of like fray the edge of it and get some of those warp threads loose, and then you could knot them into a pattern that you want. So that's one way to do it. Another way that I'll show on this pillow here, it looks like they're linking. It looks like it's just, there's pieces of material. I'm gonna show you with this string. It looks like, well, I'll cut some string first. But to me, I don't know if you've ever done latch hook, but you get a bunch of threads that are the same length. Can you, like, kind of short, relatively short. Well, twice the length of how you want it to end. Because when linking it, it's like you have to link it around something. So either you're linking it around the material or you're linking it around a thread or something, but basically it's when you have a loop and then you pull the threads through the loop. Can you see that? And then you pull it tight. And then you just do that a bunch along the edge of something. So that's another way to create a fringe. And then once you're done doing that, you clip along the edge if you want them to all be like the same length. Okay? And then I have this t-shirt here, and I thought this would be an alternative way. If you have a t-shirt laying around that you don't wear or that you don't like, I was thinking, you know, what if someone doesn't have a spool of thread, and they do have a t-shirt that they don't like? Well, then you could take the sleeve and unhem the sleeve. It's funny, I don't particularly have a strong connection to this t-shirt. It says Chautauqua Dining Hall. And I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's a dining hall in Boulder, Colorado, I'm guessing, or it was, if it's still around. And I found this t-shirt in my house. Someone left it behind, and it's a gray shirt, so it kind of has that feeling of being in between two ends of a spectrum. It's somewhere in between. I kind of feel that with this tassel, that it's somewhere in between. And somewhere in between everything and nothing, and somewhere in between the tassel and fray, although this isn't even a fray. This material isn't really frayable because it's not woven, it's a knit, so it could be unknitted. And while I'm unpicking these stitches, oh, I just got to the end of it. So what I was going around was clipping every 3 stitches, and now I can turn it over and it'll just come, the stitch can just come out if I pull it. And yeah. So you're lucky if you can find the thread that just takes it all out. And I have my iron on so we can take it over to the iron. Although this t-shirt's, I mean, not all t-shirts are like this. Sometimes when you have a seam where the hem is, usually you'll sew the seam first and then you'll hem it, but in this case it was hemmed before. So now in order to unhem it, I have to take this seam out. Yeah. But one thing I was going to say was that if you have a sweater with like a chunky yarn, I'll go get an example. Well, that sweater's not a good example. Okay. Oh. Here's a sweater that I have, and it has a relatively thick yarn. And so let's say you have a sweater that you don't wear, that you don't like. You could find a place to cut it, or you could just cut it and then start you just shred it, and then you pull it, and then you get the yarn from that, and you can just unravel an entire sweater. And it might get caught in some places, and that's okay. You can like cut it or unknot it, whatever is easiest for you. But that's another way if you want, because then what you could do is you could then like finish the edge that you unravel. Let's say you just don't like the hem of a sweater. You could unravel the entire hem, and then you could go back and like whip stitch it so that it doesn't unravel, and then you could use that thread to make tassels, and you could either add the tassels to the bottom or somewhere else on the sweater, or you could add the tassels to something else. And I'll show you how to do the tassels in a bit. This is, so I've gotten the hem down, and now I'm going to iron it. Come on, focus back. Okay, so I ironed it out. So what I'm gonna do now is just cut it like parallel to the bottom where because the sleeve cap has kind of a shape to it, but I'm just gonna cut it to where I can get a rectangle out of, from where I can get a rectangle out of it. Okay, and now I'm going to make little fringes. And I'm gonna leave like a 1/2 inch at the top together. And then, but I'm gonna cut these about just really pretty thin, about 1/8 of an inch. All the way down. And all the way around. And I'm doing this with a t-shirt because a t-shirt won't fray as much as something else. Although, even if you do this with just like a rectangle of material, you could do it that way. I think I chose this just because it was like the sleeve of a t-shirt seemed like an accessible tube that could just be converted into a tassel. And for some reason I'm thinking of, when I think of tassels, I think of little beings coming to life. And like little creatures. So the tassels are almost like their antenna, or like their legs, or their arms coming down. They also kind of are like little skirts too, like little people with dresses or skirts. Or if they're if they're like antennas, it's like what are they? What's on their radar? I'm thinking of fringe, like leather fringe on jackets, and how that was a way to sense the wind. Or that has been a way to sense the wind. And so it's a way, yeah, like an antenna for the elements to have these extensions of ourselves to heighten our perception of our surroundings and our relationship to the land, and with the elements. And feeling into the atmosphere around us. And when you're cutting a lot like this, it's good to have your hand in a position where your wrist isn't really bent. You want your arm and your hand to be in a straight position. I just found that my hand was like crooked down like this and it started to get tense, so it's good to orient your materials and your tools to a place where you feel comfortable. So also thinking of your back and your how even in making these tassels and cutting all these trillions of antennas, like how, not just when the tassels come to life, but in the process of them birthing through me, how is my body and how does this movement synchronize with the movement of my body? Like feeling the materials, feeling the tool, my scissors. My scissors are speaking to my elbow, like move your elbow down so that we can be flatter. And so actually it's more like moving my elbow up so that my wrist, moving my elbow up from my shoulder so that my wrist doesn't have to be kinked and scrunched up. And when thinking about the meditative aspect of this. So what's going to happen is once I finish cutting all the fringe, I'm going to scrunch up the top of this. I'm going to do a gathering stitch and scrunch up the top of this and bind it up so it'll be a tassel. Okay. And if you want, sometimes I like to layer the tassels as you've seen in my examples. So I might like put a different color inside of another color, inside of another color. So you could do that with this too, if you have different colored t-shirts or materials. And so thinking about the somatic cues. It's like each 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 4 snips for one tassel. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another thing I'm thinking is if you want shorter tassels, you could cut strips from the t-shirt sleeve, and you could do this, you could, you know, leaving an edge a bit at the end to gather it and bind it. You could make shorter tassels, so you could make in that. You could even put them all together. You can make a really fat short tassel if you do multiple layers, or you could make multiple tassels. It's like just the more girth you have, the thicker the tassel is going to be. And I'm getting to this point where there's like a kind of a triangle. It's like the inseam was kind of crooked. It wasn't totally perpendicular, and we'll see what happens towards the end. It might even out, but if that's the case, just you can just cut the triangle out. Alright, see this kind of weird triangle bit? I mean, you could leave it if you want. I might leave it. Or you could just like cut across right here. Just cut it so that it's still connected in a tube. But I might leave it just because that's part of the story. And then if I cut it off, then what will happen? Then where will it go? I don't know, but I'm going to use this piece. this red thread. Actually, I'm going to use a longer thread because I'm going to gather it and then I'm going to bind it. So threading this needle. And we're gathering. Just going in the center of this space. It's about a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to go just right in the center at about a 1/4 inch. Okay, going all the way around, bring it around, like SpongeBob, or not. So once it's loaded, then we can pull it through. Making sure to not catch anything. And keep moving around. Loading and loading. I'm just thinking about that clothing swap and thinking about how cool that would be to combine with these sewing journeys in person, to have a clothing swap and material swap. Like maybe it's even just, maybe you just have some really great sleeves and someone else could turn them into tassels. Or something like that. Alright, going around, gathering round the fire of the tassel, inspiriting the being that will blow in the wind, to feel and sense and to deliver those divine messages from the cosmos. So now we have it gathered into this much. So that's pretty tight. I bet if I tie it, I could probably cinch it in some more. Cinchy. Oh, no. The thread just broke, but I want to catch it before it comes out, because we do have a pretty long thread, so we could still tie a knot before it unravels. We'll tie a knot and then we'll bind it. So cinch it up and tie a knot. I'm using it like a thread that's actually for weaving, so that's probably why it's not super strong, because it's not like a stitching thread, but I do use it for, I think it's appropriate for like darning and tassels, and so if I wind it around a bunch, it's not gonna break. But so see how I'm just winding it up around the top here, making it as tight as I can. And it's actually probably good to leave the tail sticking out so you can tie it when you're done. Or you could put the needle back on it and you could anchor it and knot it into your material. Okay, so I'm at the end here. I'm gonna tie a knot. So it's actually good to have these hidden and not super visible, the knots, or at least the tails. So I am going to tuck them in back into the material. So what I'm going to do before I thread the needle, I'm going to put the needle into the material. Okay, and then once it gets close enough here, then I'm going to put this tiny thread in through the needle. You need to flatten it out a bit. And then when I pull the needle through, it goes in. So it's going to be a little easier to do with this one that's longer. So get the needle so the eye is still sticking out. Thread it. And I'm also thinking of this like esoteric story behind threading the needle when the eye is sticking out and you have the tails left. You have two really short tails left, and then your eye is barely sticking out. It's like right before, it's like the bedtime story. You just have a couple short tails to get through, and your eye is barely open to listening to them. Whoops. And I need my pliers because the needle's kind of stuck. So there we go. Then comes through and the tail is actually sticking out a bit right here. So I'm going to clip that off, and there we have our tassel. You'll see. And now to connect this, onto something, you can kind of open it up in half and when you're connecting it, just loop around this like your thread can loop around the bottom here. And here's our little person. Although you probably want more than one string to loop around the bottom, so you could do a few just so that it's pretty secure. And then after you do that, you could bind it again. Unless you want to just like go through the center of this binding. Or maybe like halfway through your binding, you could insert in like a few strands to be able to hold it up and then continue binding. That would be a good way to do it. So clearly we're just making this up as we go and getting the gist of tassels. All right. Another thing is you could, once you loop it around, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking I could just tie a knot close to the head. The idea is that I just don't want it to fall. I just want it to be secure, you know. I don't want it to fall off, so. So here's our tassel for today, and I'm going to show you another way to make a tassel. I have some yarn. Alright, this is some yarn. This is Mexican yarn. I either got it at a Mexican shop in Seattle or it's what I have left from what the yarn I got in Mexico, but it's both the same. It's like this acrylic yarn that's like, it seems like it's spun in threes. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna hold, like if you want a bigger tassel, you can hold your fingers wider apart and wrap around. But if you want a smaller tassel, you hold them closely, or you can even use less fingers. So I think I want my tassel to be about this big. So I'm gonna line the end up with where I'm gonna end up cutting it just at the edge of my pinky. So we're gonna wrap around. And however much we choose to wrap around is how full It's going to represent like the fullness of the tassel. And if you're making multiple tassels and you want them to be the same, I would cut them first. Figure out how long you want them to be and cut them first. That way you just have the same length and you know how many fingers and how wide, and you just make it from there. Or if you want all your tassels to be different, you can do that too. Okay, so wrapping around and round, so I think I'm reached a place where I'm good. And now I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to tie it. I'm going to tie a thread at the top, and this is going to be that thread that ends up connecting it to whatever it's going to be sewed to. So I just have the thread, I'm going to tie a knot, just securing it all at the top. Like I said, I might do a few threads because I want it to be secure. So I think, yeah, I'll put a few in here. So that, like this, and then right. Alright, so that we're secure. So now if I want to add another color to it, I can add another color, but I think now is an okay time for me to cut it. So I'm going to hold it at the top and I'm just going to cut. I'm going to pull it and cut the bottom. Just pull it taut and cut it so it's exact. Okay, so we have it like this, kind of like a little bow tie. And if you want to put another color inside of it, you could do, I'm going to do orange. So I'm just going to do the same thing that I did before. Wrap it around my pinkies, or wrap it around my fingers, so it's going to be about the similar length. Although it's going on the inside, so it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't need to be as, have as much fullness, because it's going on the inside, and the outside needs to, I want it to be able to like have enough to wrap around and cover it up, so I think that's good. And cut it. So now I take this and I wrap the red thread around this and around all of it and loop it through here. Making sure it's like centered on the inside. Actually, it might be good to just do it like this So this is the side right where the knot is right here. And so I'm going to put the orange thread right here, and I'm going to tie the knot so that so I get it taut, and then once like I get it all taut like this, tie a knot, and now it's all like tightly centered in one place so that when it comes back around, the blue can easily be like shaped around it, you know? But I'm gonna bring it back to the side and tie the red. In a knot. This red is kind of irritating me. I think I need to make them all the same length or something, so that I can tie them all at the same time and there's not different things going in different directions. Okay, so there's the top. And we still need to cut the orange, so we'll just center the orange so that we're cutting directly in the center. And now we can kind of shape the blue so it covers around. Oh, we have another little being coming to life. It's so exciting. And it doesn't have to be shaped like this. You could have like one side one color and one side the other color. You could have different colors in different places. The idea is that they're just secured at the top here and hanging from this place, because eventually we're going to pull it down like this, and we're going to get our thread or more yarn. We're going to leave a tail like we did before on that gray one. I'm going to leave a tail, and we want it to all be really tight, so holding this with my thumb and then wrapping around. Making the head. Okay, and once you have enough, and you can cut it. And now we want to tie them together. I know there's probably other ways of doing this, so they're like hidden, but this is one way. Okay. And then look, there's the inside, a little orange brightness, peekaboo. Okay, now the last part is probably the most satisfying for me, is when we trim it all up. Okay, so it's like giving the tassel a haircut. So you want to just trim it to where the shortest thread is, basically. So it's all straight across. And I think that's kind of the magic of tassels, is like getting them all together and then having this like flat bottom where they all flare out. All right. And there's all the bits that go into the pile for stuffing. And here's our little baby. Ding 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 ding. And now when you are connecting it to something, you can tie this on somehow. If you, or you could, when you're doing it, you could make a longer thread so that you could sew it on. Even with this, you could sew it on as long as you just loop. If you get these threads looped into the material, you can then tie it and secure it. And then if you need to hide these threads somewhere, or like pull them into an inseam or into a hem, then you can do that and tuck it away. So there we have our tassel. And yeah, and here's our other tassel. So you can do it with any kind of yarn, repurposed yarn. You could do it with a t-shirt. You could do it with old socks. You could like make a tube like this from old socks if you want to just like cut the bottoms off. I guess it depends on the material of the sock. Yeah, if it's thin, you could do this, but if it's thicker, I'm not sure if you could do it. Or you could unravel your sweater, or your scarf, or a hat, or something. So, yeah. Thank you, everybody, and gratitude for these new births. May they find their places in the galaxy and find their way home to the heart of the universe. Till next time, thank you.